Hello, everyone. I hope we're all having a wonderful day. Today, I'd like to start off with a quote from Dale Carnegie. Even God doesn't propose to judge a man till his last days. Why should you and I? Today's topic of this video is going to be how to be less judgmental, and this is coming from insights of Fyodor Dostoevsky's book, Notes from the Underground. Personally, I spent a lot of time underground. This book came into my life at purely the perfect time, pure serendipity. I was struggling a lot with social anxiety and an inability to just go with the flow of life. I was really just struggling with existing, I guess. And eventually I got enough of it and I began to work on my problems. This led me to a weird realization that there was some people I could talk to and I had no problem. It was a great time. And then there was some people that I just couldn't even fake it. Like I just had no energy to talk to them. It wasn't a mood thing. I wasn't really as socially anxious anymore. So it kind of left me with the question of what's going on. I ended up coming to the realization that I was an asshole. The people that I had no energy to talk to were people that I was judging as lesser people. So whether it was the way they looked, lack of knowledge, or something, I would just find anything to be critical or judgmental about. And then I was like unconsciously deeming them as just like not worth my time, which is a messed up way of viewing people. I 100% admit that. And all these judgments weren't fair. It was also on myself. I was being judgmental toward myself. And I learned that character is much more important than the subjective things that we deem as better or lesser. And I would prefer kindness over intelligence any day, right? The type of overthinking and judgment was holding me back from progressing in my life and going with the flow of life. It was just stopping it. I put my intelligence up here above everything else, and everything else fell by the wayside. This ended up being super detrimental to my quality of life, and I couldn't have a fully well-rounded life because it requires balance and harmony, right? How could I expect to embrace and prosper in life when I only simulated things in my brain and I didn't actually go out there and test them and interact with people and do these things, right? How could I connect with other people when I judge them and myself so harshly? Now, luckily, I found the book Notes from the Underground when I did. It was honestly like looking in the mirror. Right at the time, I was beginning to question my thought processes. This had kind of been a thing that I realized was going on, but it was, when it comes to being mindful and self-aware, it takes some time. You're like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Then I started reading this book, and just, it was almost like looking into a mirror, kind of. This guy in the book is a little bit more fucked up than I was, but I think that the author does this to illustrate a point, right? His reduction of judgment and over analyzing everything was just plain and simple. That made sense to me. Once I realized this and I actually started doing things in real life and seeing how it went, my reduction of judgment and over analyzing everything was just liberating. The amount of positive interactions that I had once I let go of these things increased and I started to feel joy in life and it was new for me. Now, you may not be as much of an asshole as I was, but I think that this book can benefit anybody who's looking to improve upon their mindset and find more joy in their life. So, in today's video, I will be breaking down the main points that Mr. Dostoevsky has for us in his book, Notes from the Underground. To start off, I think he really highlights the principle of inaction from overthinking. So, the Underground Man, which is who I'm going to be referring to as the main character, he doesn't actually have a name. But the underground man is extremely intelligent and he's constantly thinking. It's really like a never-ending loop of mental simulation and stimulation that just becomes more and more negative as that stone's rolling, right? In the book he says, quote, I was so used to imagining everything in advance and had thought of it all so many times that I again fired up with other people's ideas. I anticipated conversations with relish, was afraid of being disgraced, and was continually imagining such disgrace. And so it became about that on many occasions I appeared either ridiculous or an offensive bore. This quote was him talking about a dinner party he was at with former schoolmates, and the main character, rather than enjoying the moment and just having a good time at this social gathering, he pretty much just became a piece of furniture. He was so in his head thinking about, oh, I'm gonna be embarrassed, or oh, I'm gonna look dumb or whatever, and he ended up not doing anything because he didn't want to make a mistake. And if you think about it, your brain's trying to prevent you, it has a fear of looking dumb, a fear of being vulnerable, right? So if you thought about it, it's doing its job because you can't make a mistake if you don't do anything. But you also can't enjoy and live a good life if you don't do anything, right? So you might as well be a rock with a brain at that point, right? Personally, I've ruined a few gatherings, maybe more than a few for myself by overthinking. I felt like Doctor Strange when he had the time stone, and he's got to look for that one perfect moment where everything goes right. But the truth is, in real life, there's no perfect anything. You just have to get in there and live life. Thankfully, I eventually learned to just relax, sip a beer, and enjoy the moment with everybody else. The next point that I think is highlighted very well in this book is being hypercritical leads to isolation. So in the previous example at the social gathering, the underground man spent a good amount of time judging everybody and reducing everybody to just the worst things possible, the worst things that he could think of. But there was also another moment that he did this that was just truly heartbreaking and honestly kind of relatable. So right after they had this party, he was all in his head, like ruminating, pissed off about like, oh, I look dumb, anything, and he ends up getting wasted. He wakes up the next day hungover in a brothel, and he ends up seeing a woman in the room who is a prostitute. Her name is Lisa, and they actually have a really beautiful conversation. They seem to genuinely connect. He gives her like a whole speech on how she's better than this, she's beautiful, she can get her way out. And we also learned that she's not there by choice. Something, circumstances happened, and she ended up there, and she's kind of trapped. So he ends up convincing her to leave the next day and to come and join him to meet him at his address and be a part of his life. So everything was great. Lisa does this, but in the time, it was about a day between her leaving there and meeting him at the house. In that short amount of time, the underground man is just overthinking everything. He's seeing like all the different ways it could go wrong, why he would eventually get tired of her, why she would eventually leave him for someone else, just all the negative possible things, right? So when she arrives, he just completely flips on her. He humiliates her and shames her and just gives a really, really mean speech for like uh at least I think 2 pages just talking shit about her, and it made her leave. She just cried and left. And quote from the book, "But Lord, how I wanted to speak eloquently to her at that moment. But no, I had to muck it up and talk philosophy." He truly wanted to love her, but instead he tore her apart. He pushed her away to save himself from the potential loss. After she leaves, he chases her, but he finds nothing but himself alone in the cold snow. Honestly, the imagery of this scene really resonated with me. It's one of those things you just read the words and you feel like you can really see how lonely he was in that street at night, right? Just in the cold snow. And this scene really resonated with me. I ended up having a super crazy dream the night after finishing the book, and it was really similar to their interaction. Me and the girl I was dating at the time, we were having an argument, and I said some things, and she said something back that got me upset. And then I ended up just telling her to leave, even though really I didn't want her to. And once she did leave, I ended up chasing her out the house down the street, but by the time I got out there, she wasn't there. And instead of it being snowy, there was like some alligators preventing me from going forward. And yeah, that was it. Really weird dream, but oddly similar to the part in this book. Now, one could argue that the underground man might have an anxious avoidant attachment style. The way he pushes away people but still internally craves connection, to the point of even more resentment. He resents himself for wanting it because he thinks that it's stupid and it's meaningless, but he still has that connection, which just leads him to even more self-judgment, right? So I don't know about you, but I have made the mistake of doing this, pushing for people away out of fear, looking for any reason I could to disqualify them from being my partner or my friend, because they weren't perfect, right? And neither was I. No one is. So how could anybody ever love anything or anyone with perfection being the standard? When you overthink things to the very end, it could seem rational to avoid relationships, right? There's plenty of reasons why it could go wrong. You could be hurt. And truthfully, there's only one way it goes right, and there is an endless amount of ways it could go wrong. So if you don't stop your brain from just endlessly going on about, oh, this could go wrong, this could go wrong, it's surely going to ruin any potential good things you could find. The last point that I think is beautifully highlighted in this book is that judgment turns inward, and it often starts inward. Often judgmental people judge themselves just as brutally, or even more brutally as they judge others, with narcissists obviously being the exception. They're perfect. The beginning monologue of this book opens with a similar way that it ends, and it begins with, I am a sick man, a wicked man, an unattractive man. And it ends with, to my earlier, almost causeless hatred was added now a personal hatred born of envy. He justifies his rationality with his intelligence, which provides him with the ability to see things truthfully that he thinks everyone else is just oblivious or doesn't want to acknowledge. They'd rather bury those feelings by chasing love and status. And the reality is that we all have our own truths in mind, and focusing on the negative things is true, but it's also completely discarding and discrediting the other truths, which could be positive things, neutral things. There's so many different ways of looking at things. It really is about what you focus on, right? So in this case, the underground man does want to care. His behaviors show just that. But it always returns back to the negative self-judgments, which then continues the loop of negativity, and the process just repeats itself. How could you love someone if you hate yourself? How can you succeed if you don't allow yourself to take chances and grow? How can you find joy when you discredit its existence? These are a couple of the questions that reading this book led me to ask myself. And while the underground man did exist on the surface with other people, eventually his thought processes and actions led him to be completely isolated. It led him to becoming the underground man. He didn't start this way, right? I believe that the reflection provided in this book really provides great insight on the inner thinkings of man, right? Because we all do have judgments and we all do see the negative things. But to what extent are you going to let your mind focus on those things and continuously use those as your method of navigating through the world, right? Because if we navigate based on fear, based on judgment, based on negativity, that is what reality becomes. Reality is what we focus on, right? So I think that this book does a great job of bringing you into the mind of someone, obviously at the extreme level, really to highlight the point of these things. I hope that me sharing this with you maybe made you consider a few things about yourself. And honestly, I really would invite you to read the book. I do have a free link to the book linked in my blog post at the very end. I read it from that link. I have no affiliation to this website, but I do highly recommend it. It's about 200 pages, but it's a great book, and I hope you can get something from it like I did. I appreciate y'all popping in today and checking out the content. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out the blog post and also check out my Pinterest for other content. I have that linked in the description below. They both cover the same kind of things I talk about on here. But anyways, best of luck on y'all's journey to self-fulfillment and growth, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thanks.